you have to have good grades. You have to have the right classes on your transcript and all. But I'm always interested in people who have contributed to a startup, or they've been a volunteer in their community, or they play the clarinet, or they do karate, or some other
Yeah.
kind of distinguishing characteristics that's going to set them apart.
Welcome everyone to the Tech Guide podcast, where we give actual advice to those wanting to break into tech or are looking for their next gig. Today, we're sitting down with Camille Crittenden to explore how undergraduates can break into the industry, whether they're studying STEM or the humanities. We'll dive into the essential skills, the role of AI in shaping the future of work, and how to land your first internship or job. Plus, we'll talk about ways to stay ahead in a fast-moving industry and build a career that stands out with the test of time. Camille, thank you so much for being here. So excited to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Ryan.
We're talking about a lot today, and we're going to be talking to undergraduates about career paths, skills. How do I stand out in the market? Before we dive into that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background, just for the listeners.
Sure. I have had sort of a long and winding road to get to where I am now. Currently, I'm executive director of the Center for Information Technology Research in the Interest of Society. It's a multi-campus research institute that's based at UC Berkeley with partners at UC Merced, Davis, and Santa
Wow.
Cruz. I've been here for about 12 years now, but before that, my academic background is actually in music. So I have a music degree in undergrad. I have a PhD in musicology. I lived abroad and did research in Vienna for a couple of years.
So cool.
And then coming back, I decided that the tenure track faculty road was not one that I necessarily wanted to pursue. So I looked around at what other opportunities there might be given the skills that I had developed over those years in writing and public speaking and trying to synthesize complicated ideas for a general audience. And I went into fundraising at first at San Francisco Opera, so trying to translate some of that musical background into a new skill set. And then eventually came to UC. I worked at UC Press, the publishing company, for a couple of years in public relations and development, and then came to UC Berkeley and worked in international and area studies and was executive director for the Human Rights Center before
Wow.
coming to CITRIS. So that's the short answer
Yeah.
of how I came to where I am. But I hope that also illustrates some of the topics that we can talk about today about career preparation and how some of your most meaningful experiences might not lead you to where you originally thought you might be going.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to be asking about Vienna later in this episode because I absolutely love the concept of like leaving for a little bit and coming back. But I really want to like dive into it right away because you obviously teed that up perfectly about like what we're going to talk about and your background here. I want to talk to students here because many students feel the pressure to major in STEM to work in tech. Everyone wants to work in tech. It's high paying. Yes, I want to be there. But how can like humanities students position themselves for success in the tech industry?
Yeah, I think that once you get to the point where you're applying for jobs, it's a good idea to be able to practice how you communicate the skills that you gained by being,
Mm,
say, a music major. So, working in music and, say, an ensemble setting, you have to work with a team. You have to learn how to step forward and step back at the right time. That's always important in a work environment. Being able to communicate to an audience, whether that's verbally, being able to stand up and make a presentation with
yeah.
authority and confidence, or writing. If you're an English major, writing skills are imperative. So having those skills under your belt are always a good thing. I hope in a hiring manager who's going to understand. And the last thing I would say is discipline.
Mm,
Music, you have to work hard.
oh,
For
yeah.
many of these performing arts, as a dancer, as an artist, you spend many hours honing your craft. And I think that also translates well into the tech sector where you have to have a lot of discipline and sometimes working alone to figure out your individual contribution as well as working within a team. And so I think music and other performing arts really trains one well for both of those things.
Yeah. I think that's like a really interesting concept. Doesn't matter if you're a computer science major, like you're really valuing experiences here to identify how can I bring this to a job and communicate like how it can translate to text, is what it's sounding like.
Yeah.
I would love to hear jobs as well based off of what you should be doing, junior, senior year. Like, what are jobs you should be looking for as an undergraduate if you are in the humanities area?
Yeah. Well, I think both for humanities and for STEM students, it's important or helpful to look around for extracurricular activities that you can be doing. No matter what your major, your campus might have some student tech clubs
Yeah.
that you could participate in or tech related clubs, aviation or drones or climate science or
Mhm.
other kinds of clubs that might help to both give you experience and connections as well as something to put on your resume. So there's that. And then also the internship opportunities. That's also another great way to get really hands on experience in a field that you might be interested in going into. You might spend 8 to 10 weeks in the summer working in an industry and you come to realize, oh gosh, that's really not for me. That's
Yeah, yeah.
also a valuable learning experience.
Yeah, there's so much, like, value in landing, like, an internship, and landing that first internship is, like, really hard, just for they're kinda taking a risk on you, you're still kind of like an intern, but it is hard, like, for a sophomore applying, like, it is challenging. I wanna ask for someone that is applying for their first internship, what are ways that they can stand out, in the job market?
Uh, well, it depends on the application itself and what they're asking for, but I would say here's also where writing skills come in. Like,
Yeah.
if you can tell your story in an engaging and succinct way, that is going to stand out. And to make it sound not like Chat GPT.
Yeah, yeah.
So we can talk about some of these Gen AI tools as well. They can be a huge help, especially perhaps for students whose first language is not English. Leg up into presenting yourself as a quality candidate. But that kind of synthetic text is also easily flagged
Yeah.
and, depending on your employer's attitude about it and just your own you wanna have a convey a sense of authenticity. So, if you rely too much on these Gen AI tools, then your own personality might not come across the way that you would want to.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I think is the power of the Gen AI tool, especially when it comes to cover letters and stuff, because like, you could really whip them out, but there's an asterisk to that because while you can whip them out, that doesn't mean that text is human by any means. So for someone that does wanna lean into Gen AI for cover letters, for resumes, I mean, what tips specifically do you have for them?
Yeah, I would also caution that your resume or cover letter is perhaps going to look like 10 other people's
For
cover
sure.
letters, because everybody else is using it too. So, yeah, I think the more that you can draw out some of your own unique experiences, so say with the clubs or whatever the background is, your years of piano lesson or working in marching in the marching band or, whatever that might be,
Yeah,
those kinds of experiences are going to set you apart. So I look at a lot of resumes and cover letters as
I'm
a
sure.
hiring manager. And also, we have a large internship program at CITRIS. So I have seen a lot. And, grades are great. You have to have good grades. You have to have the right classes on your transcript and all. But I'm always interested in people who have contributed to a startup or they've been a volunteer in their community or they play the clarinet or they do karate or some other
Yeah.
kind of distinguishing characteristics that's going to set them apart. It makes me think, oh, well, they might be an interesting person, not just someone who brings a certain set of technical skills.
Yeah, I think that's, the value of, like, volunteering or, like, just getting some sort of experience that you can bring into, like, your first interview to, like, talk about that, and like you said, it does make you an interesting person, so it's something that you should do. But you talked a lot about hiring or, like, you've seen a ton of resumes, you've been part of the hiring process a lot. Setting the tone early when you get on that video call is super important to you, so thinking back to, like, people that have, like, really stood out to you, is there one similar characteristic that they did, like, early in the call to, like, set the tone for it?
I would say when you're going into this interviewing season, it's really good to practice. And I
Mm.
know that like role playing is kind of a painful exercise, but I promise it will help you when you're actually in that situation. So you can figure out what you want to say, how you want to say it with a minimum number of, ums and uhs and stumbles. Even if you record, I've done this too, go on Zoom and record yourself and then you can really hone how you're coming across and practice. That's another thing that you might gain from being a, performing arts major is practice.
Yeah.
You're going to get better if you practice. And the same goes for interviewing. So that would be some advice.
Yeah, I mean, a lot goes into interviewing as well, and I'm sure you can talk more about the benefits of this as well. But like understanding like your tone and your fluctuation, like that just like comes across as like confidence, and like you can bring that to an interview and then come across as more confident essentially, and that it's a way for you to really like level up in that process as well.
Yeah. And be sure that you've done your research with the company that you're
Mm,
interviewing with. I think that kind of kills an interview if someone was
yeah,
coming to Citrus and they say, oh, I'm really excited to be here and I love your work in chess
yeah,
and
yeah,
dynamics or something, like, we don't do that. So,
yeah.
that's important to do your homework.
Yeah, and also like seeing where like the recruiter's at before like even get on. Like for you, for example, like you got on here, I'm like, oh, like you're in Berkeley, like California's like so beautiful. Like being able to like show like you did background research on the company, but also a recruiter, I think is like a phenomenal way for you to be able to stand out once this whole interview process. Uh,
And yeah, LinkedIn makes that very easy.
Yep,
So that's another platform to recommend as students are going out into the job market. Really pay attention to what you're putting up on LinkedIn because the recruiters are probably also looking at those
for sure.
resources and doing their own homework.
Yeah, yeah. And like this is really tailored towards undergraduates. So excuse my question here, but of course be careful of, like your LinkedIn, but Instagram and like TikTok's like that's just something like a 19-year-old, 20-year-old's gonna have. I mean, do you typically advise like of course have it be clean like always, but like keep your profiles private, public if there is good stuff? I'd love to hear how you would coach that.
Yeah, I would say be judicious about what you make public.
For sure.
Nothing's going to kill your chances more than having like raucous party pictures or
Yeah, yeah.
having
Yeah.
some, outrageous handle for your name or,
Yeah.
something like that. So, not to censor your personality too much, but just be aware that what you put out into the world that other people are likely going to see. And depending on
Yeah.
the audience, you might want to be careful about that.
Nah, I love it. Enough said on that one. And that's one mistake people will make in that. But I want to hear about it like another common mistakes you see students making when trying to break into tech. What are they and how can they avoid it?
Have someone proofread what you send in. Typos and such in a cover letter there's no reason for that. Do your homework about what the position is, what the company is that you're looking into. And then in your cover letter, try to tailor your experience as much to that exact position as you can. So
Mm,
everybody might have a generic cover letter, but if you're applying for a marketing assistant position, that's going to be a very different letter than you might write for a coding position.
yeah.
So make sure that you're going to tailor your comments and drawing the connections between your background and what the job is requiring as closely as you can.
Yeah. I think like one workflow that would be super handy is like create that basic cover letter, but also like combine it with the job description. Be like, hey, can you combine this job description with this cover letter? I think that's like a really easy way for people to like stand out and make it tailored for the cover letter for companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even so.
Proofread.
Yeah. Also, because as we know, these GPT tools can make stuff up.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that it's not embellishing your resume or your cover letter in ways that are not authentic.
Yeah. There's so many like ways to go into text. And one of our favorites that we've been talking about on this podcast a lot. I know you're interested in this topic, but even past guests is like AI and ethics. Like that's like a
Mm.
huge like industry right now for students that are interested in like responsible AI and ethics. Like what are some good ways to get involved like while still in school?
AI ethics and AI policy are really coming more to the forefront, and it's always a changing landscape. But I
Yeah.
think as AI just expands, that the legislatures and policymakers are going to be called upon to regulate it in certain ways or not. And so I feel like the people who are going into tech, it would benefit them to understand and be familiar with that landscape at least a little bit because it may come up in interviews. So if you were interested in that area, you should look around at your campus to see if there are programs
Mm,
in tech policy, if you have a public policy school, or even within like computer science departments, sometimes there are ethics classes or responsible AI classes. At the University of California, the system wide overall has a set of responsible AI principles.
yeah.
So if you're within the UC, you might check that out. There's a website for the university, ai.universityofcalifornia.edu, and you might find some resources there. But I think more and more universities are coming up with their own set of responsible AI principles. So that might also be something to refer to.
Yeah, yeah. But like hands-on experience as well. Cause it probably I don't know. Tell us, is it hard to get a job in this as an undergraduate or if someone wanted to build a portfolio? How do they really get involved to it while they're in school? Maybe if their school doesn't have anything either.
Yeah, there are a lot of great online resources. There's an organization called innovate-us.org. It's run out of NYU's GovLab, and they have put a lot of courses online about
Oh, amazing.
responsible AI and Gen AI applications in the public sector. So there's a lot of material there. And also, LinkedIn has a lot of courses. I think there
Yeah.
are a lot of free resources out there if you have an interest in that particular area, even if your school doesn't have those kinds of classes, I think there are online resources available. And those, many of them come with the kind of certificates that you can post on your LinkedIn profile.
For sure. I also want to baseline this. I should have asked this before. Sorry, this is an awful interviewing by me. Like when someone says like AI policy, AI like regulation, like what like really does that mean? I just want to get clear for all the listeners here. So maybe I am doing my job here, but yeah, like what? Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I would love to like hear that as well.
Yeah, well, in California, there has been a lot of legislation that's been introduced, bills introduced. Some of them have passed, but things like regulating misinformation,
Mm,
like watermarking synthetic data. There was a bill that was fairly controversial that didn't end up passing, but it sought to regulate the size of the foundation models. So the models that the AI is being trained on as
interesting.
a measure of cybersecurity. So I would say just take a look at some of the legislation that's being passed or being deliberated to get an idea there. But then there's also industry policy, so what are the policies that the companies themselves are setting around their own behavior? In the not too distant past, all of the social media companies had trust and safety teams
Yeah.
that would look out for, trying to curb the spread of misinformation, not only in the US, but also in the global markets that they operate in. Now, those teams have been curtailed or fired,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
by a number of the tech companies. We saw Facebook step back from its
for
fact
sure.
checking and those kinds of safety principles in the recent past. But hopefully that could come back someday, or maybe there are other social media platforms that would have an interest in that. That's important because businesses too don't want to see their products advertised next to hate speech.
Yeah.
So hopefully people realize that it actually makes business sense as well to have these kind of trust and safety teams in place.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like a good opportunity for AI and ethics is like if you want to get into AI ethics, particularly, like you shouldn't honestly be a computer science major. It sounds like it should be like these humanities stuff that takes a lot of persistence, but also has a lot of creativeness to it and not just coding it.
Yeah, I agree with you that these are good ways for the humanities or social science students to get involved in the tech industry. But then there also often have to be technical solutions to that. So you have to work hand in hand with the engineers who are writing the code or designing the platforms to be able to flag appropriately or
Mm,
insert the watermarks or whatever the technical answer might be to it. So that's why this kind of interdisciplinary approach is really important.
yeah, I love it. We've talked a lot about breaking into tech, AI, and ethics as well. I'd love to rewind the clock and talk about some of your personal experiences. I am interested in the Vienna going over there. I'd love to hear how an experience overseas shaped your professional career, how you approach things. What were some of the benefits of it? Because I think there's so many benefits of it, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. There are so many benefits. And living there, I lived there once as an undergraduate, my junior year abroad. And then I lived there again, maybe 6 or so years later as a graduate student and spent a year there. So there are a lot of things that you learn by being in a foreign country for an extended period of time that you wouldn't learn just by going for 8 or 10 weeks for a semester. You really have to think in the language. I
Yeah.
was taking classes in German. I didn't even start studying German until I was in college. So I
Wow.
had a couple of years of German behind me before I went as a junior. We had a couple of weeks of intensive language instruction, and then we went to the University of Vienna. So that was quite intense, but I feel like it really helped me to grow as a person and to be able to really understand in a fine grained kind of way the history of that city in
Mm,
particular and that part of the world, as well as current ideas of the people who live there now, and their understanding of the world. And so I think those kinds of experiences are super important. When I was there, I was doing archival research. I wrote a dissertation and a book about Johann Strauss, which is a 19th century composer. And so, if anyone is interested in doing that kind of archival work, it's amazing to be able to go there and look at these scores or look at these letters or the documents from 150 or more years ago.
oh, that is so cool. Yeah, I feel like being dropped in a city, having to learn the language. I'm sure when you take that into interviews, it's something that makes you interesting. You're able to talk about that more in depth. I'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, I think it can really help you to build those independence muscles.
Yeah.
You really do have to kind of fend for yourself, even if you're going on a program or something where you have other resources. I hope that you would put yourself in a position where you're amidst people who are from the local area and not just
Yeah.
stick with the other Americans you might be traveling with, because that's amazing. And then even like once you're there, like being able to travel and see some of these landmarks and historical sites that you'll hear about for the rest of your life, and you could think, "Oh, I was there. I remember when I was there."
Oh, that is so neat. That is like such the benefit of travel is like you see something like in the news and it's like, oh wait, like I was actually like there before, like something like
Yeah,
they talk about in history. It's like, oh, like I actually saw that. I think that is like the whole benefit to travel. And I think a piece that I really appreciate about you is like how much you love music and stuff. So I'd like to hear like who are some of your favorite composers? I'm asking this selfishly because I am like in like a deep piano, like lo-fi type of mindset right now when I work. So I'd love to hear any recommendations you have for composers or just some of your favorite artists.
sure. My graduate degree was in historical performance practice, so I did a lot of 17th, 18th century kind of
Wow.
music. So I played the harpsichord, I played the organ. I love Bach, especially the vocal works. Well, anything by Bach actually is a huge favorite for me. Then on the other end of the chronology, I am a huge Brahms fan. He
Hmm.
was contemporaneous with Johann Strauss and both lived in Vienna at the same time. So I love anything by Brahms as well.
Okay, sweet. Well, I got some music research to do then. Last question before we end this. This has been so good. I love like the actual advice, especially when it comes to like the interviews and AI ethics. It is a really interesting field here. Just general piece of advice for undergraduates right now that want to pursue a career. What advice would you give them? Anything that I did not hit on?
I would like to advise students not to stress out.
Hmm.
I know that there's a lot of pressure put on you by your parents, your teachers. What are you going to do when you
Yeah.
graduate? What is that degree going to prepare you for? Our lives can go in all kinds of different ways. And if you do good work and be a thoughtful person, then I know that you're going to figure out what the right path is for you. Some people might have a straight shot toward a career that they really want and are set on, but others might do this and might do that. And then hopefully it'll all add up to something that is going to be fulfilling and make you happy, be able to have a subsistence and pay your bills and all of that, but also just be a happy person, satisfied person.
Nice. I love it. Well, I am happy and satisfied with this episode. It sounds like, oh my gosh, I need to connect with her. Where can they do so? Where can they find you?
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn, Camille Crittenden. You'll see my name in the show notes.
Yep.
You can also look up CITRIS, CITRIS UC.org. It's a great place to look to see what Citrus is doing.
Awesome. Camille, thank you so much for today.